Ladies and gentlemen, and sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swirsky, Sports Tech Chicago, one of the two or three best podcasts around. So grab yourself a nice cold one and a bowl of sausage, park your keister in your French room, and listen to Bill Swirsky, Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose. As long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swirsky, Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swirsky, Sports Talk Chicago.
Welcome to another edition of Bill Swirsky, Sports Talk Chicago. This is your host, Sean. Excited to have a Bears victory. This is a good Sunday episode. We're going to keep this episode pretty short. We're going to have Lester from WindyCityGridiron.com on, and I promise you that either Tuesday or Wednesday we'll have another episode where we'll talk White Sox, Cubs, Bulls, and Blackhawks, and also the Rockford Ice Hogs, and we will have a special guest, Teuvo Teravainen, on the show. But without further ado, I want to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. Only about 90 minutes from the city limits. Next game at home will be Friday, November 21st against Iowa. So come see your first place Rockford Ice Hogs. Check out icehogs.com. Family fun, tickets starting at only $8. Welcome to Bill Swirsky, Sports Talk Chicago, Lester. Lester is from Windy City Gridiron. It's a great resource. Make sure you check it out, WindyCityGridiron.com.
What's up, Sean? How you doing?
Much better now that we got a win under our belts.
Yeah, it feels a lot better with a win finally. It was a long time coming, but I thought the game plan was pretty good on both sides of the ball for the most part, and the play calling, which was kind of questionable the last few weeks. I kind of like what they did. They had a little bit of different stuff going on with some of the play design, and they still did a lot of the bubble screens, the slip screens, but I thought they had some different looks off it, so it looked good so far. But again, it was the Vikings, so we'll see how it goes next week.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little frustrating with the play call because everything was short. Screens and just short passes and runs. It was a little bit frustrating because you know what a potent offense they have, but then you have to stop and think about it is the fact that the Vikings have been bringing pressure to the quarterbacks like crazy lately. So, and with a rotating offensive line and injuries that you really can't let them drop back and make deep passes because they're going to sack Cutler and they're going to hit him hard. So you sort of have to get the ball out quick.
Yeah, the Vikings do have a pretty good pass rush. I think that was part of the game plan going in. They wanted to do some really quick hitting stuff, and then on some of the flashing stuff when they kind of went deep, and they had a chance to take some shots downfield, and it worked this week. And Marshall and Jeffrey both were making big plays for Cutler downfield. So it was a nice change for the offense after the last few weeks. The offense was looking pretty good.
Yeah, and the offensive line played pretty well, other than some hiccups here and there. It was actually holding up well, but I mean they didn't have to hold much for long.
Yeah, this is one of the games where I look at the pass protection every week in my Sack Watch series. This is one of those games where the play calling is really what helped the pass protection the most, because like you said, there were some leaks here and there. Bushrod and Ola, I thought the tackles, I thought they both had some mistakes, but they didn't give up any sacks this week. So a lot of it goes to the play calling. A lot of it goes to Jay Cutler being really active in the pocket. I thought he moved really well this week. He had his eyes downfield. He went over 300 yards passing. He had a couple silly interceptions, but that's kind of what you get with Jay Cutler.
Yeah, and it was nice because it really did look like Jay sat down and watched the film and saw how many times he forces it to Brandon Marshall, and he really, I think he tried almost to a fault to not do that this week.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much of that was Vikings. I didn't have a chance to go back and rewatch some of the film at all, but I'm guessing he was just being a little more patient with the ball. I mean, Jeffrey had the most targets. He had 17. Marshall had 10. So it's not like he wasn't going to Marshall. He just made an effort to go somewhere else. And I think Jeffrey might have had the best matchup all games. That's why he kept going that way with Jeffrey. And he paid dividends with a big yards and a touchdown.
Yeah, and it was nice to see them finally be able to move the ball. But the frustrating part a little bit was, even though they were moving the ball, there was so many miscues as far as penalties go.
Whenever there's a lot of penalties, obviously the first thing you want to do is look at the coaching. And that's obviously the first thing you think because the team's undisciplined. But some of these penalties, they're just silly penalties. You got to stop. A few others, I think the refs missed. The other way, there was the punt, the illegal block in the back. I think they called on Christian Jones, where he just kind of was running downfield and he turned his back, and it was just a kind of an odd call. But you got to clean up some of that stuff up. Last year the Bears were very real low in penalties. This year they're a little higher. We got to wait and see how that goes next week. But for one game at least, it's the offense as a whole looks better.
Yeah, and the defense had a much better game plan too. And you brought up the point on Twitter: is it Mel Tucker's having a good scheme, or is it the Vikings offense just apathetic? And I think in reality it's a combination of column A and column B. If you watch the game film on the Bears defense, is one of their Achilles heels is the read option, and you have a quarterback with Teddy Bridgewater that can run that, and they chose not to.
Yeah, I was surprised. I thought there were going to be a real heavy dose of the read option against the Bears, because that's obviously been a problem with them, for the last 2 years. But thinking back, I think only ran it once or twice, so it's just kind of odd that the Vikings didn't want to go that way. Maybe they didn't want to expose Bridgewater, since he has been banged up a little bit this year. So whatever the reason was, it's the Bears defense. Like you said, it came out and could have been a little bit of both. Vikings offense kind of sketchy, but there were some different blitz designs from Tucker. He had a couple nickel blitzes and did a few different things, and his players were making plays.
Yeah, and I've been screaming from the top of the mountains that Mel Tucker seems to only want to blitz with linebackers through the A gaps, and it's so frustrating week in that week out. And this week he actually brought other blitzes, and it was nice to see because they were effective. So hopefully he sees that as well, and moving forward realizes that, hey, A, we have guys that can do this, and B, it works.
Yeah, you got to bring it from different angles. If you're going to be a blitz up the middle kind of team, you got to scheme it to where your guy's unblocked. If you're just up there mugging the A gaps and you're getting picked up all the time, that's not doing much for you. I don't know if you recall last week at the Packer game, their last sack they actually blitzed 2 guys through an A gap. The first guy got picked up by the guard. The second guy, there was no one to block him. So if you're going to do something like that, you got to scheme it so where you're having your guys unblocked. Otherwise, you're just making a big mess in the middle and hoping one of the other guys breaks free. But this week Mel Tucker was bringing some different packages and playing some different stuff in the back end. So for 1 week at least, offense and defense both looking good.
Yeah, and so it was nice to see, because they actually had some good coverage in the secondary. The Jared Allen showed up to play, and they brought some blitzes that were working, so it was nice. And they were also helped out by the fact that the Vikings really were not trying to do a lot of deep passes. They weren't trying to do anything flashy. They were trying to establish the run and really hammer that home. And I feel like the Vikings sort of went in there doing what the scouting reporters on the Bears, like the surface almost, where, oh, the Bears have a hard time stopping the run. And that's sort of true statistically, but they've gotten beat by a few big runs and a lot of misdirections and the read option plays, more than just running it straight up the gut. And that was what the Vikings were trying to do, and the Bears went in there game planning to stop that.
Yeah, it was a real weird game, from just looking at the statistics side of things. The Bears really did, they put a whooping on them. From the numbers, they really dominated. The time of possession, the Bears had it for 38, the Vikings only 21. So, if you're looking at the numbers, the Vikings, they tried running the ball, but the only guy that gave anything going was McKinnon. He had just 8 carries. So, they were trying to do things, but the Bears were able to keep the ball away from them. If it wasn't for those two, for the one interception anyway, the second was kind of at the end of the half. It didn't really matter, but not for that one. Who knows? They would have had the ball that much longer, and who knows what it looked like then. Bridgewater, real low attempts, completion percentage was bad, and the Bears defense, they were getting after him, and a good all-around game from the players.
Yeah, and one of the other funny things was Chris Kluwe, who was the former punter for the Minnesota Vikings and is now, I don't know if he's officially retired or he's just sans job, but he was watching the game from home and live tweeting during it, and he had a lot of interesting things to say, like on the he said refs called that one a hold because the defender spun at the end. They're going to see if the guy got the twist around. He said that Soldier Field is a really bad surface to do onside kicks because the ground is hard. It makes the ball bounce. And what else did he say?
That's an interesting one because usually the field surface is so soft that they're pulling clumps up all over the place. Unless he's talking about it when it's frozen, but I'm not sure if it's completely solid at this point of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think really it's like concrete with chunks of dirt on top and some grass sprinkles.
There you go.
But the most interesting one was he was talking about some of the special teams, and I tweeted him and said, well, why does it seem that the Bears special teams has been so bad since Dave Tobe left and Joe DeCamillis came as the Bears special teams coordinator? And he didn't reply as a general post. He sent me a direct message and said, because he was a really good special teams coach and his replacement isn't. Most guys view special teams as a necessary checkpoint to move up the coaching ladder, so they don't care very much about it. And that just really says something, because this is a guy who spent umpteen number of years in the NFL, and he knows special teams, and he can see where there's gaffes on the field. And I don't believe he's ever played for Joe DeCamillis, but he can see these things. Like he was ripping the way that they blocked the gunners for the Bears, and a lot of the things they do in their coverages, and it kind of mirrors some of the things that Pat Manley has said, but Pat Manley has said it way more PC and softer because he's a former Bears player and B, saying it on radio. And so it just seems that, that even though they were clicking well on offense and defense, the special teams is still suffering.
Yeah, there were some breakdowns in special teams. Obviously, the fake punt really hurt them, but this has been a problem all year. The special teams have been bad. When the Bears brought over Joe DeCamillis from Dallas, he had a pretty good reputation. I mean, that's what the media was selling us on, and the players all praised him in Dallas, and but since he's been in Chicago, his special team units have been really bad, and this is a fan base, like you said, is used to Dave Tobe, and special teams is something that the old regime with Lovie Smith really emphasized. They thought it was a very important part of the game plan, and it just seems like it's kind of an afterthought with Joe D. And it's part of it. Yeah, I know it's the bottom of the roster is being churned so much, so he has a lot of different guys in and out of there. But when they're making the silly little mistakes that these guys should know, like you mentioned, the blocking the gunners. I mean, that's effort. That's not really technique as far as where what to do. You're just out there doing a stalk block on the guy when you're out there on the gunner. The breakdowns on the fake punt. You got to be ready for that. The ball's at midfield. It's a prime place to run a fake, and it's like the Bears weren't even paying attention at that point. So, there's a lot of problems. He may be one of the guys that's a fall guy at the end of the year. Him and Tucker, if he can't get things turned around. So we'll see what happens. With Joe D.
Yeah, and before Pat Manley actually got his full-time gig on the radio, and he was just doing spot shows, he said something interesting, is that Devin Hester apparently last season was very frustrated with Joe DeCamillis because of the scheme that he runs as far as return blocking, and it doesn't allow a guy like Devin Hester to get the room to be able to run and get the lanes. Wow. And he was very frustrated by that, and Pat Manley pretty much summed it up that it's a flaw in Joe DeCamillis' scheming, and that's really shocking to hear, especially when they could have replaced him in the off season and they chose not to.
Yeah, maybe that just goes to Trestman being a little too loyal to his guys. I mean, this is a guy they brought in. He had a lot of NFL experience. He did get rid of a couple guys more on the defense side of the ball. A couple Lovey guys, a couple of his guys didn't make the cut. But the thing with Pete Camillus, it's 2 years now. 2 years now of a lot of problems. So we have to see, how they're going to shake this up going forward. I can't imagine them being back, especially if they don't, show anything the next few weeks. But if the special teams does have an uptick, the way the Bears do things, they're going to keep things the status quo and have everyone come back next year.
That would be something very frustrating to the Bears fans, because
Yeah.
is for what our expectations were and what we've gotten. Somebody's head has to roll. Somebody has to be the fall guy, whether it be the correct person or not. Somebody has to be the fall guy.
Yeah, at some point, if you're not where you believe you need to be, then you have to make a change. I mean, if the Bears, obviously it looks like they're going to have a losing record this year. That's going to be a step back from last year. Someone has to take the blame for that. You can't just say everyone regressed and everything regressed. The coaching, the players. There has to be someone. Something has to happen, and if it's going to be on the players, then they better make some wholesale changes here. So, but if it's a Phil Emery thing as far as what he's bringing in, then maybe a couple scouts go. But the way we've seen Chicago being fans, there's not a lot of times they make a lot of changes in an offseason, especially if guys are under contract.
Yeah, and what was really frustrating to me is after that just ridiculous lopsided loss last week is, I'm sure you heard in the press conference, I wanted to see what Mark Trestman had to say, and I actually pulled the soundbite last week and played it where he said, our coaches did a good job during the week of prepping. And I wanted to jump through my TV, and I'm not one for being angry at somebody for no reason or trying to be irrational about it, but that was, if I was ever going to be irrational, that was going to be it, because it was so ridiculous what he said. Is how can you say you did a good job when your team got destroyed and the opposing quarterback had over 300 yards and 6 touchdown passes by halftime?
They look good in practice, maybe because they're not good on either side of the ball. So their offense looks good, the defense at times looks good in practice. That's just all coach speak. You're not going to get much from a head coach. The fact that he's not going to throw his players or his coaches under the bus, that's the kind of guy he is, and that's fine. There's very few coaches. They have the type of background where they can come in and just be a real ball breaker in the media, and go at guys in the media. That doesn't happen very often in this day and age. Bill Parcells could do it back in the day. Tom Coughlin has done it at times. He's from that same old school mentality. You're not going to get much, from a coach or from players, for that matter, as far as throwing guys under the bus. And if that does happen, if a coach does do that, now you're going to have to question: is he going to lose something with his players or his coaches in the locker room? So it's definitely a slippery slope you go on. You're not wanting to sound like an idiot where you're saying that the practice is great and the coaches are great, when as fans and as media we see that it's not great. There is a problem there. Maybe the best thing is just to not say anything at all, because when you say something that's so obviously just a cover-up, you end up looking like a jackass.
And this week, the announcers for the game, which was odd that the game was an NFC versus NFC game and it was on CBS, but they had Rich Gannon was one of the announcers who played for Mark Trestman and won an MVP under Mark Trestman, and he was covering up for Mark Trestman a lot. If you noticed during the game, anytime there was anything kind of critical, he would be like, "Well, the players got to play. Well, the players got to play," and that's true to a point. But when you have defensive players that can't communicate with each other, and the opposing quarterback knows what the defense is running, but the players don't, that's a coaching issue. When you have that many penalties, and it's every single game there's that many penalties, that goes on coaching. There's a lot of things where it's easily the coach's problem, and at some point you can't blame a 53-man roster and not give the coach any blame.
Exactly. I wrote an article earlier this week, based off some comments that Rich Gannon made on Monday in his show that he does on the CBS Sports Network, where he took some shots at the Bears at Cutler. You know, a lot of the stuff he had to say was he would say the Bears were unprepared. The team looks like it lacks focus. You know, there's no excuse for how the Bears came out and looked flat. And then his what he leads up to is the Bears should bench Cutler. You know, all of his reasoning was more along the lines of the team not being ready. That to me, that points at the coaching. And then for him to jump to the conclusion of it's time to bench Cutler, that just tells me that he's back in his old coach. And then today, in like you said in the broadcast, he was taking a lot of shots at, like I said, the players. And then every time he did mention stuff about the team not being ready or the mental mistakes being a problem, he never mentioned Mark Trestman's name. And I think there's a reason for that. It's because he didn't want to throw his old coach under the bus.
Yeah, and it's I actually wrote an article about it this week too, and it's a little bit unfair how much hatred goes to Jay Cutler is because he's on pace to have the single greatest quarterback statistics year for a Chicago Bear quarterback ever, which is not saying much because it's the Bears quarterback history, but he's on pace to have like 4,300 yards and 33 touchdowns. And if you look, that's statistically he's going to be better than Phillip Rivers, Tony Romo, Eli Manning, and right on par with Drew Brees. That's not a bad statistical year. So you have to say, all right, is it fair to blame the quarterback for everything, or do we have a systemic issue going on?
Yeah, that's been the problem, through a lot of the people in the media and a lot of the Bears fans too this year is, no matter what the problem, it's fallen on Jay. And I understand it to a point. His turnovers this year have been some really silly ones, and he hasn't been able to get the offense going right away. But he's just one part of the offense. Yeah, he's obviously the most important part, in a lot of people's eyes, and it's his job to get his teammates going, as far as getting the ball where it has to be. But the play calling has not been up to par, in my opinion. The last month, they've started the games real slow. Part of that's on Jay, yes. Part of that's on Trestman. Part of it's on the offensive line not blocking. His receivers been dropping balls. So, Cutler, it comes to the territory, he's going to get the blame. When they're doing bad, and he knows that. But at some point, you got to look at the big picture.
And so, two more things I want to talk about is looking at the rest of the schedule, and I know it's always dangerous with this much time left in the year to look at the rest of the schedule, but they got the Buccaneers coming in this coming Sunday, and then Lions, Cowboys, Saints, Lions again, and then Vikings last game of the season, with a lot of their really difficult games like Patriots, Packers out of the way. This season really could be salvaged if they're able to beat the Lions, because
that's the key. Yeah, as you said, the Lions first place. If they're able to knock them off, it's going to be tough in Thanksgiving. But I mean, it's such a weird season. Anything's possible.
Yeah, because they won today. Next week's a very winnable game against a bad Buccaneers team at home. Cowboys have shown vulnerability. The Saints haven't looked like the Saints. And then you've got the Vikings again. So, I mean, if you're able to win the games that you should win and split against the Lions, that's a 9-win season.
Yeah, the bad thing is that the Bears got to leapfrog both the Lions and the Packers, because I don't think a wild card is going to come out of the NFC North if it's the Bears. So that's the only they have a real uphill battle. They got to get ahead of both those teams, and then by having both losses against the Packers, obviously the tiebreaker goes to Green Bay. But getting the 9 wins is possible. I mean, the Lions. I mean, do you believe in the Lions? I mean, they've always shown a way to fall apart at the end. Is this the year that they finally put it together and they're really that good of a team, or are they going to have some problems themselves?
And it's if you're going to start winning games, it's you either got to win them all or start losing, because the upcoming draft is not going to be as deep as the last year's draft, where you can get a guy like Kyle Fuller at the spot that they picked in. So if you're gonna tank, you sort of need to tank if you want to get this good draft pick. And I hate to be that kind of guy, but if you're not going to make the playoffs, it's as a fan, it's tough to decide what you're rooting for, is because it's going to be a really, really uphill battle to make the playoffs. And they're at the tipping point of not making it, but again, they're also at the tipping point of being pushed out of the really good draft status spots.
As the players, obviously, a lot of the players are, they will be back next year. For them to kind of, go to tank mode, you're rarely going to see a team that just can do that. I mean, there's still enough players in that team that have enough pride that they realize that they will be here in 2015. They're under contract. They're young enough. They're playing good enough to be back. And, as fans, we have to have the confidence in Phil Emery. His first draft obviously is sketchy. But his last two drafts, they seem to be pretty good. John Bostic was the question mark, but he's coming around. He's made some big hits today. So, maybe there's hope, and maybe Emery can put a third good draft class together.
Yeah, and that's was my final point. Is Phil Emery is he's shown to be very good at the drafting. I mean, other than Shea McClellan, who fans are going to get on him because that was his first pick ever as the Bears general manager, he's been pretty solid. I would put his draft statuses against anybody in those last 3 years, but he's going to get knocked a lot because he chose a really basically unknown guy in Mark Trestman to be the head coach, and passing on some better guys. And whatever happened with Bruce Arians, people are going to be angry about that because he was one of the Bears finalists, and he's doing phenomenal things in Arizona.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate way things go. Arians is, he's a guy that came in and the Bears wanted him to do all the mock interviews, and just a weird story that came out, with the last few weeks. And what's the point of making a guy that was a head coach all of the year prior with the Colts? What's the point of having him go through a mock interview or a mock press conference? It was just kind of silly. So I can see why Arians didn't want nothing to do with the Bears. I think that just might have been Phil Emery trying to overthink the process. Hopefully he learned from that, and he won't make that kind of mistake again moving forward. But Arians, he's looked good as a head coach so far in Arizona.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot of rumblings where the Bears' big issue is they don't have a football guy as the head of their whole organization. They have a guy who's a relative of the guy who started the team, and I sort of agree with that, is because I think Phil Emery is he's really, really good at some spots as the GM, and there's parts where I think he's lacking, and I think as a tone that doesn't set a good tone for the Bears.
Yeah, well, you got George McCaskey up there. Then you have Ted Phillips is supposed to be running the business side of things, and you hear some of the longtime Bears players and coaches. They say that and the guys that cover the team, they say nothing happens in Hallis Hall, unless it's given the green light by Ted Phillips. So, is he the guy at the very top pulling most of the strings? If there is going to be an epic failure, for the rest of the season, maybe Phillips is the fall guy.
Which would be a very interesting turn of events. I don't see that happening, but that would be very interesting, because that would open the doors for a lot of speculation and a lot of rampant rumors in Bear fandom. Yeah,
I mean, he's a guy that I don't think, if you take a popularity poll from the fans, I don't think anyone would either A, if you know who Ted Phillips is, or B, they just don't feel he brings anything to the table. As an organization, the Bears making money still, so that's obviously what his main focus is. But at the end of the day, it's winning games, and if the McCaskey family aren't willing to make some of the tough decisions, that an NFL franchise have to have made, I think the Bears aren't ever going to turn that corner. But time will tell. We'll have to see how George does. It's only, I think, his third year as the top guy, George McCaskey. So we'll have to give him a little bit to see what his style is going to be like. Because with Mike McCaskey, it was kind of bad, a real train wreck to what he did, and we'll see how George does here. Now that he has.
Yeah, and it's also a little bit of a different sort of scenario with the Bears, because they're not one of these teams that just got purchased for $1 billion, where the owner has to recoup money and make sure he's pushing to win because winning is money. But the Bears are owned and paid for, and have been for since before either one of us was born, that it's just a moneymaker. And but I mean, as a town, they need to take a cue from the Blackhawks, where they were a team that was making money, but then they put in a bunch of money, started winning, and they're putting together a perennial winner. And look at the explosion of profit that has come with that team. I think you know, a little bit more of that type of mentality would go a long way in Hallis Hall.
Yeah, it's just the McCaskies. They have their way of doing business, and the team there set in their ways. And I think if the Bears would have lost this week, our talk today would have been a lot more negative towards the family overall. Because I was pretty angry last week. I don't see how a team like the Bears, one of the founding fathers of the NFL, how they can just be at this point where they're a running joke, with all the media and the stuff to like CBS, Fox, and everyone's cracking jokes on the Bears' behalf, after the Packer beat down. So, it's sad that a team that has been so good for so long is now has turned into a laughing stock. So, and that falls on the McCaskey family. They have to, like I said, do what is willing to be done by an NFL franchise. They have to make the tough decisions, and they haven't made them in the last few years.
And I actually, it's going to sound weird, but I almost felt a little bit bad for the Packer players after the game last week, because they were getting interviewed, and every single one of those reporters wanted the players to just be like, the Bears suck, and we kicked the crap out of them. And they had to do everything to sugarcoat it and make it seem like they didn't just do that. And I almost felt bad for them, because it was like, that's got to be hard. Is you want to be happy and excited, and you kind of want to save your public opinion or your public face as well, and not just demolish the other team verbally after a game. And the Bears deserved everything they got in the media.
Oh yeah, I mean, there are a few Packer players that they were out there saying they were really feeding into that, but for the most part, they did a good job, and just kind of, like I said, it's professional. They got to try and keep some professionalism, but like you said, they deserve it. The way they played the last 2 weeks, come out of a bye to look that bad, I guess you got to tip your hat to what they did this week, but it's still the Vikings. They're not that good of a team. They got some problems on offense. Their offensive line had some problems, so next week another bad team, but there'll be no excuse for the Bears not to go out and win that one.
So I guess the last thing I'll ask you is, what do you look to see next week? What do you expect to see?
You got to see the same type of some play calls. Like I said earlier, I like some of the inventive stuff the Bears were doing. They got to keep building off that. You can't show us the same stuff you did this week. Show us something again that's a little different next week. If the offense is going to put up the kind of yards it needs to put up to win, we need to see more variations on the screens. If you're going to come out and you're going to do the bubble, fake the bubble and have the guy go up the sideline off a pump fake. There's little wrinkles you can throw in based off what you saw this week, that you can do next week. So, and then defensively, you got to get after, Josh McCown. You got to make him work, and you got to show, everyone that the Bears made the right decision there, sticking with Cutler and not going.
Yeah, I think it's actually it's a big game on multiple levels for the Bears. Is one, as a face issue, is you can't lose to the guy you just fired. And that, especially at home, you can't lose to the quarterback that you just let go, that a lot of fans wanted. Yep. And if to salvage the season, you need to win this game. So there's a lot of reasons that they need to, and I agree with you that they need to throw some wrinkles in, because the Buccaneers defense isn't terrible. It's their offense that's terrible, which is not shocking to say for a Lovey coach team. But I think the big key is ball possession, because the Buccaneers offense is bad, but you give any NFL offense enough possessions and they're going to score points. So you need to keep the ball in your possession and keep it away from the Buccaneers, and don't give Evans a chance to go wild on you.
Yeah, that's the guy I'm worried about, is Mike Evans. How the Bears are going to match up with him. Honestly, I would love to see the Bears put Fuller on their top receiver, just because I think he's a little better as far as his coverage. Jennings, he's shown flashes, but, I haven't seen much this year from him. They should, or if they're going to shadow him, then go ahead and make the shadow with Jennings. I think you got whoever the Bears feel is their best cover corner, they should have him lined up more with Evans, because Evans looks really good. He's a real big, tall, strong guy, and kind of like Brandon Marshall, and, he could burn you. And with the Bears safety play is always sketchy. He could be a guy that could really be a big difference maker for the Bucs.
Well, is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
Now we covered quite a bit. It's good stuff. It's just a matter of the Bears got to win, and it's crazy as it sounds if the Bears win next week. They're 5-6, and everyone's going to start talking about playoffs again, right?
Yeah, that's the nature of Chicago fans. Is you get a couple game winning streak, and everyone's looking at the season much differently.
It's the beer tastes much better after
much
Bears
tastier.
win, right?
Well, thanks a lot, Lester. Everyone make sure to check out Lester at WindyCityGridiron.com. Thanks a lot for being on the show. All right,
no problem, Sean. Talk to you next time. Bye.
Well, thanks for checking out this episode, and make sure you check us out at SwirskySports.com, on Twitter at SwirskySports, Facebook.com/SwirskySports, and if you listen to us on YouTube or on iTunes or Stitcher or anything like that, make sure that you follow us, like us, subscribe to us, all of that good stuff. So thanks for checking us out, and until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like
Remember, New Yorkers, smoking crack is not legal on planes. Bears 31 to -7. The Bears.
Oh, when the Bears go